The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is a special Sunday morning edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are talking all things up to this point as far as WrestleMania week and weekend go, and it's been very eventful. We have a lot to talk about, and both some of it is in-ring news, some of it is out-of-ring news, but it has certainly not been a boring week really at all. And night one of WrestleMania certainly, I think overall received very positively, and excited to see what that gives us for night number 2, which will be coming up in just a few hours. And of course, tomorrow morning we'll have the recap of night 2 of WrestleMania right here in the same time slot, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on the Monday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Joining me in studio on this Sunday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Should I be hearing you through my headset? Because I am not.
Let's see if That's interesting. I don't know. Oh, your headset's turned down. How about now? There we go.
Now we got it. I can hear everything through here now perfectly. Yeah, it's been a wild weekend so far. Still trying to catch up with a lot of the non-WWE shows. I didn't think at this stage I would be looking at Minoru Suzuki versus Yoshihiko as his best match of the weekend, but that's kind of where we are. A lot to get into and a lot still to consume before we're done with all this.
Yeah, and a couple of notes before we get started right off the top to make sure we kind of have all of our bases covered, with it being WrestleMania weekend and everything that goes with that and kind of the time consumption that's involved in that. Music podcast, which is usually scheduled for tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to back that up to next Saturday. So next weekend, we're going to give you back-to-back days of the Hard Rock Empire. We'll go over the music of April the 4th on Saturday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And then on Sunday night, our regular slot, it'll be the music of April the 11th. So 2 music podcasts for the price of none, actually, as it turns out, coming up next weekend. So make sure you join us for that. But this will be, we'll just stick to the news podcast this morning. We'll have another one tomorrow morning, and that will be our weekend of podcasts. The other thing we kind of want to note, and this should be kind of common sense if you're tuned into this podcast, but there's going to be spoilers. So if you haven't watched the first night of WrestleMania, if you haven't watched NXT Stand and Deliver, you're probably going to want to wait and listen to this a little bit later on. Go check those things out and then come back and see us, because we are going to be talking about those events pretty extensively in the past tense. So definitely want to make sure that you are clear. And obviously, if you've tuned us in, like I said, between the thumbnail, you probably got a pretty good idea of what we're going to be doing on this podcast. So, just again, one final warning that we will be talking spoiler things on this episode. So if you don't want spoilers, you're going to want to dial away now. With that said, I don't want to say the biggest news of the weekend, but we're going to start with something that actually has nothing to do with in-ring action that occurred over the weekend. And it was news that started to leak out yesterday, late morning, early afternoon, that there was a rumored event coming up between WWE, specifically NXT, and the Mexican brand Lucha Libra AAA. And we would then find out beyond that WWE has purchased AAA. And so it's going to be more than one event, obviously. It's going to be WWE taking over that brand. And of course, we have spent quite a bit of time over the past few years watching AAA events. So we have at least somewhat of an understanding of what is going on there, as much as you can for someone who's not in the Mexican wrestling scene. But this feels pretty momentous. Obviously, the details were pretty sparse. Triple H talked about it on the post show last night, but it's pretty clear that what this is going to look like. Is their weekly TV going to be on, Netflix or Peacock? Are we going to get WWE involvement in Triple Mania? Like all the things that you really want to know the answers to, we don't have answers to yet. But what we do know is WWE is going to own AAA. We heard he saw Vikingo make his WrestleMania debut, getting very much involved in the Rey Fenix, not Chad Gable match. It's interesting news because AAA is such an enigma. It's so interesting. It's kind of campy at times, but it's a pretty big statement for WWE. You know, this isn't just a partnership. This is an acquisition, and I'm curious to get your thoughts because I'm kind of struggling to put together exactly what I think this is going to mean in my head because I feel like there's still a lot of unanswered questions. But at least up front, this seems like a really big deal for both WWE and for AAA.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a few years ago we felt like WWE was really poised to do this big worldwide expansion, and it kind of seemed like maybe the pandemic and some of the turmoil at the top kind of put a halt on that. But this kind of leads you to think that it's now full speed ahead once again, and I'm not surprised to see them go after AAA. I feel like that was a pretty good partnership, like potential partnership there, given the relationships between WWE and the people who handle a lot of the creative with AAA. Yeah, it's tough to digest all of this right now because, I mean, at first, like you mentioned, we got the word that there was going to be that Worlds Collide event. Like, oh, cool, they're going to work together. That's fine. And come to realize that's just the tip of the iceberg, and there's this much bigger story. And also funny because I often malign these ridiculously long pre-shows for WrestleMania. Like, why do you need a 3-hour pre-show? And then, lo and behold, yesterday they actually announced something with weight and relevance that would make someone actually want to tune into it. Yeah, I can't wait to see just the depth of the crossover, given how many Mexican, Latin American luchador wrestlers that currently are employed by WWE, and some of the names that you would love to see mix it up with people in WWE. I mean, obviously, Psycho Clown, Pagano, Chessman, Rey Scorpion, Sam Adonis, Murder Clown, Vikingo, Lady Maravilla, Lady Shawnee, Nina Hamburguesa. Like, there's so many names that you want to see them pop up on NXT or Raw or SmackDown at some point, and who knows? I mean, it's really early, but I think this could be a really huge thing.
Yeah, it could be. And, obviously, and we talk about this a lot when it comes to company acquisitions, there are concerns. Yeah. And I don't want to downplay the concerns. Anytime we've talked about it on the anime side, anytime the market gets smaller, it's concerning because that is potentially less jobs, less opportunities down the road. Obviously, again, WWE's saying all the right things. We want to expand. We want them to expand. We don't want to change their culture. We want them to continue to do the things they do. I definitely encourage you to follow Lucha Blog. I know he's not the biggest WWE fan, but I do think he has great perspective on the Mexican wrestling scene. And, the one thing he pointed out yesterday is that AAA is really kind of at their core an outlaw wrestling company, that they were created because they thought that Lucha Libre was broken and they were the ones that were going to try to save it or fix it. So it's been a company that's had a very interesting history. It's definitely worth looking into. And again, Lucha Blog does such a great job of chronicling. I want to say he's the Dave Meltzer of Lucha Libre because that might have some negative connotations to a lot of modern wrestling fans. But as far as an archivist, a historian, I don't think you can really do a whole lot better. And I think you can kind of get an idea of what AAA has been about. And yeah, all those names you mentioned, would love to see them. I think when you watch that trailer yesterday, you get a pretty good idea that the event they're going to run, as you mentioned, which is going to be June 7th at the LA Forum, there's clearly going to be a lot of non-NXT people on that event. Yeah. Like pretty much, you got Lucha Brothers, you got both the Mysterios probably. You've got Santos Escobar, you've got Andrade. Like, there's going to be a ton of WWE, Latin American flair on that show as well. It's just honestly kind of mind-blowing news that kind of got buried, not intentionally, but just because WrestleMania is WrestleMania, it kind of slid under the radar. But it feels like we're going to look back on this in 6 months and think this may be the biggest thing that came out of WrestleMania weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I was not expecting something so newsworthy to hit night one of WrestleMania because you have WrestleMania. There's no need to make headlines beyond that. But here we are. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping what this ultimately leads to is with what happened in night one of WrestleMania, maybe we set it up where maybe Rollins can bring in like Hijo del Torontes as his personal referee and he refs all of his matches. Can we do that? Like, so many nonsensical things that you can't help but think this would be really awesome, and we'll see what happens.
Man, I don't know if WWE fans are ready for heel ref or not, but that is an interesting concept. Something along those lines I think would make a lot of sense. But very interesting news. I think the kind of the next date to keep an eye on if you are kind of interested in seeing where this goes. AAA, at least historically, and again, we don't know what this is going to look like going forward, but historically tapes a lot of their TV kind of 3-4 episodes at a time. So obviously their weekly TV, which aired last night about 8:30 Eastern on Space, did not mention, as far as I know, the acquisition. In 2 weeks, they do have live television in Mexico City. So that's where, you start to wonder, like, does WWE fly some people down? JBL has been involved with AAA for a while. And, again, now you look back on it and you start to put the pieces together. He was involved with TNA. They do the partnership with TNA. He's been involved with AAA. Now they buy AAA. So, you mentioned Sam Adonis, who of course is Corey Graves' brother. Yep. What do you tie in there? Is that an open door to get Graves back in the ring? There's so many questions, and I'm honestly very excited for all of it. And like I said, coming out of this weekend, as cool as everything else has been, this could end up being one of the coolest things that ends up happening. And I hope all things positive out of it. We'll find out as we go forward. But
I feel a lot better given the current power structure in WWE that they're not just going to jump in and make drastic alterations. I mean, you never know, but because you do kind of compare it to any other acquisition in any other line of business where it's like everyone always says that it's business as usual until it stops being business as usual.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be cynical about it because I do truly believe that Triple H has a greater passion for wrestling as an art form and as a historical thing of value that maybe other people don't have. I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I think this will be really good, but now it kind of makes you look a little sideways anytime you have WWE involvement in any other non-WWE thing. Like, is this just a one-off, or is this are they sending feelers out to see what business we can do in the future? Like, is that what's going on with MLW? Are they going to try to mend some sort of relationship there and for something greater? Who knows?
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder. And having been in a company that was acquired and went to crap, like I personally have that. Hard for me to look at it in another way. But, again, cautiously optimistic is a great way to look at it. And somewhat excited because I think there's some amazing crossovers potentially there if they play their cards right. And
I wonder, too, from a streaming standpoint, if WWE can now shop around AAA to the different streaming platforms, what is Netflix penetration in Mexico and the Latin American countries? Is this a big opportunity for them? I'm curious about that.
Well, I think what you could see, because obviously you have to remember, I think it's important to note that WWE, at least at the moment, has a very good relationship with NBC Universal.
Yeah.
I think Telemundo would probably be very interested in gathering AAA rights in the States. That's a possibility. Obviously, Univision Deportes also reported on it yesterday. Univision Deportes has a lot of Mexican soccer. So is there room in their slate for AAA? I don't know. But you would have to think you're going to be shopping to those two first. Like they're big, Mexican networks that have are here in the United States. I mean, every big city has a Univision station right alongside your ABC, CBS, NBC. Yeah. So, there's lots of questions, and we could spend all day talking about that, but we do have other stuff to get to. So we will get to that, and we'll talk more about this in the days and weeks to come because I do think there's a lot more to break down, including whether Tony Khan fumbled this. Like, we'll get into that kind of as we go forward. Let's jump into WrestleMania and everything else because obviously there's been a lot going on so far as wrestling events. Yeah. Wrestling started midweek in Las Vegas and has carried on. So we'll start with WrestleMania Night 1 and then we'll kind of back up from there. And we're not going to get too into detail because we don't want an hour-long podcast. Getting ready to show you the results from Night 1 of WrestleMania. So again, spoilers, last warning on that. You obviously see the picture if you're watching on YouTube or on Twitch. But, as we look at the results from night number one, I think it's best to probably start at the end. That's the biggest takeaway with Seth Rollins, getting Paul Heyman to betray both Roman Reigns and CM Punk to win the triple threat match and change the course of everything. The entrance of Punk and Living Color was every bit as good as I knew it would be. Those guys are amazing. They sound amazing even after all these years, and probably one of the best live band performances maybe WWE's ever had. The match was cinema. Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
And they handled the end, even though it was very telegraphed. One thing I always remind people when we talk about some things being telegraphed is, you're doing these things in 60,000 seat stadiums. So you do sometimes have to over exaggerate big moments. So the whole crowd is kind of on board before the thing happens. Everybody kind of saw it coming, yet it was still really well executed and a great match. Let's just kind of, of the matches, kind of get your thoughts on that one to start with. Cause again, I think that was it could end up being the match of the weekend just from a sports entertainment standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of the ending we figured made the most sense, even if it seemed out of the box on paper. But the execution of it was really just outstanding. To me, it makes you think that maybe one of the matches during the NXT Stand and Deliver card, like they talked to Paul Heyman about how to handle these kind of situations, and honestly, like you could see where it felt like they were both orchestrated by the same person. But first off, great for CM Punk getting to main event WrestleMania. Like you can definitely tell that stuff matters to him.
Yeah.
And we knew Living Color sounded great, having seen them live last year, but still always amazed to hear them and see them. They're just, considering their age, like the energy they still have. And I felt the same about Extreme because we saw them together in one show. Just great performance. I'm excited about this. If there was ever any doubt why this was a main event over any of the title matches last night, I think all those questions and doubts can be put to bed because that match was huge. I'm excited for Rollins because I feel like this guy has taken one for the team so many times the past few years, and now they're finally giving him that opportunity to maybe even go on a Roman Reigns kind of run. I think at the very least he deserves a really huge 2025.
No question. And the guy, he basically got Cody Rhodes over with his return, even losing to him with the torn pec. He got CM Punk over, both in the way he has treated Punk on camera, the disdain that he has, even the shots of him at the Hall of Fame when Punk was introducing Bret Hart and Steve Austin, and they show Rollins and he just looks over it. Like
there was the shot of him, and then there was also a shot of Logan Paul at one point when CM Punk, because a couple times during that speech, Punk said, I don't want to make this about me. At one point when he said that, they cut to Logan Paul, and he had this ridiculous like Jim from The Office look. It was hilarious.
But yeah, Rollins was the MVP of really getting these guys that were returning to the company to that level where the fans know that they're on that level.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is kind of his turn. It's his time. Reigns had his run. Punk certainly has had a great run since coming back. Now it's Rollins and another reign of terror potentially from Rollins now, and the Messiah character kind of coming back with the whole white outfit and mastermind and even a bit of the architect, if you will. But I'm super excited for him. I'm excited for Punk. Like you could tell, like you said, he was just really excited to have that match and that moment. And for Reigns, I mean, you don't know how much he's going to be around, but clearly there's a lot to unpack there. The man is literally now a chief without a tribe. He's exactly what Cody promised him a year ago he was going to be, and it took about a year to get there, but he literally is by himself at the moment, and that's an intriguing storyline in and of itself.
It's amazing because prior to the whole tribal chief storyline, I couldn't have imagined a situation where I cared that much about Roman Reigns, but they've actually turned him into somebody that I can get emotionally behind. And they've done that with so many people over the past couple of years that it's truly amazing.
Yeah, for sure. The build for so many more people is so much better than it has been. Well, let's jump through the rest of the card quickly because we want to go through a bunch. The comment about Stratton and Charlotte, I think, was kind of dead on. There were some clunky moments in that match. I think we kind of knew that was going to be the case. I mean, you have the combination of Stratton in her first WrestleMania. How do you deal with that big crowd? How do you deal with that big moment? You've got Charlotte, who, is great. I mean, there's no question about her talent. There is maybe some question about how well sometimes she works with others. But in the end, they kind of got where they needed to get to, which I think was the key. I feel like it finished strong, which was kind of what you're going to remember out of it. And Stratton got a win she really needed to kind of establish herself as somebody who's going to be a main event player on the women's side for a long time.
Yeah, I would definitely say it felt clunky at times where it didn't seem like Charlotte maybe wanted to go along with where they were heading, or maybe they just weren't on the same page. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, you've taken Stratton now and kind of given her this extra level of toughness where it feels like she can win in different ways that aren't necessarily pretty. I mean, she looked pretty banged up by the end of the match, and it kind of gives her a greater level of credibility, maybe. It's weird because when they first floated the idea of that match out there, I assumed they were going to go the Rhea Ripley route and have Charlotte win the first time around and then eventually have Stratton come back and get that win back. But the way the feud unfolded, it almost felt like they couldn't let Charlotte win.
Yeah.
Like they painted this picture where it was like, they're just going to totally bury Stratton if she loses this match.
Yeah.
Like, they can't go that route. And they salvaged something pretty good out of what was a really awkward build.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, just those two kind of need to be done and get away from each other and move on to something else. And again, I think Triple H even kind of alluded to it. I don't know if he was specifically talking about this match, but he could have been. When you talk about going with where the fans take you, I don't think they had any idea that Tiffany Stratton was going to be a babyface when they brought her up. She was not a babyface in NXT. They never turned her face to let her have that run, which probably in hindsight they wish they had because it would have given her more time to work on it. So they probably thought she was going to be a heel, and here comes Charlotte. She's had this devastating injury. She's been out forever. You just thought you were going to get kind of the John Cena effect where it's like, well, people kind of hated her for a long time, but now she's back. And
they appreciate her, so they're going to cheer her.
It didn't happen that way. So they, to their credit, unlike maybe what would have happened in the past where they were just like, you're going to do this and you're going to like it. Like, they rolled with it. And like I said, maybe that was part of the clunkiness that, how it all worked out, but in the end, they got where they needed to get to.
I think some of the archetypes of pro wrestlers have shifted over the years, where if you look at Tiffany Stratton on paper without knowing her story, it's like, well, really attractive woman, she kind of has this, like, I'm better than you aura about her. People are going to hate her, but it's like, this is a crazy accomplished gymnast who's worked her butt off to get here. I think it's hard to not rally behind that. And you give her this moveset that just lends itself to cheering for her. Like
that moonsault.
Yeah, there are just too many things she does where you're just like, well, I like Kenny Omega. I have to like her because she does similar moves.
Yeah.
It's just when that's the crop of talent you're building, it's a Jacob Fatu situation. How do you not like the guy? Because he's just amazing.
Yeah, let's jump to that real quick because I know, Chris, I don't think is with us this morning, but maybe somewhat in morning. Although Chris won our picks for night one, so he's probably not.
He stopped me, man. That was bad.
He was on it, and he even picked against this guy, LA Knight, which kind of tells you how locked in he was on getting these picks right. But Jacob Fatu is a star.
Yeah.
That match being in the middle of the card, probably a lot of people aren't going to be talking about it this morning because of all the other noteworthy things. But I don't know how long it's been since they signed somebody who's just had that it factor just out of the gate. And to me, I'll almost be shocked if we're not sitting here a year from now talking about him wrestling in a world title match on WrestleMania next year because the dude has he's a natural baby face. Even though he's got this terrifying character, he's got charisma. His promos are authentic. He has the moveset that people love because he's crazy. To me, like, he's a main event guy, and he's obviously a champion now, but like this feels like just the beginning for him.
It's kind of wild when you look at kind of the legacy of the Samoan wrestlers in WWE because you feel like for so many years, even though Vince featured them, he always kind of pigeonholed them into like one kind of character type. They were the Islander guys, or like with Yokozuna, he's a Japanese sumo wrestler. Like they were never just allowed to just be dudes that wrestled. And I think with Fatu, you're getting to see like this guy's immensely talented. Why would you ever want to like confine that into some sort of character type where he's some sort of island guy that is only somewhat civilized? And there's no need for that kind of character when his talent and just his authentic personality speak volumes. And I think with anyone, not even just Samoans, when you let people just be themselves and get over on their own merits, you end up with the best characters.
Yeah, the best characters are the ones that feel the most real, and he feels as real as anybody on the roster. And I'm excited to see where he goes. To me, he's got generational star potential. And, for a guy who's been doing it as long as he has and finally got to WWE, you can't help but be happy for the guy. He's had kind of a rough way to go, but he's a dude that I think is going to be a huge player for this brand.
But you can't help but think, watching the event, like, you get to see Haku, and you think, like, that was a dude who could have been way more over than what he managed in WWE.
Yeah, for sure. He's more known for his antics away from wrestling at this point, like being one of the toughest guys of all time. And
it's like everyone knew that, the people that worked with him. Like, why wasn't that ever explored as far as making this dude just next level killer? And he never really did that.
No, but Jacob Fatu certainly getting to do that. And LA, that match was great, and I think
both the guys are great.
Both those guys are great, and for 10 minutes it was a sprint, but they were just really great. And I think if you haven't caught that match, go back and check that one out. I feel like it's going to be underrated for the weekend. One other big one, and we'll kind of have fast hit the rest of them so we can move on to NXT. Jey Uso, as expected, beating Gunther. I know people had problems with the submission, and myself included. I think the way they will sell the submission, though, is how many guys have tried to submit Gunther and it was a moment of panic, as opposed to Jay getting the visual 3 count over Gunther, which looks much more dominant than just a quick tap out. Like, it wasn't like he had him in it it was just like, oh crap, I got to tap out. I think that's how they'll sell it. And again, because it's Gunther, I think he's bulletproof. I think he'll be fine. I don't think it's going to bury him or hurt his character. Like, he's Gunther. He'll be completely okay. He'll be a champion again. But for Jey Uso, man, like, first off, you guys got to stop putting him on first and then expecting him to go have a press conference 3.5 hours later. Because, man, that dude's going to party. Like, that was like the Cody Rhodes press conference, but like times 10. Like, and you know what? Good for him. Like, the dude deserves it. He probably has to sit there and read all the hate comments all day. So, like, man, if he wants to have a good time, that's great. But, man, he was not in any condition to have a press conference 3.5 hours, 4 hours later. But, you just can't help but be happy for that guy. Like, he was going to be pigeonholed as a tag team guy his whole life. Yeah, I know he's not the best pro wrestler in the world, and that's fine. But, as Paul Heyman said in an interview over the weekend, the dude moves merch, the dude moves ratings, he moves tickets, he's got all the stuff. Like, yeah, he may not have the most varied moveset, but he connects with the fans in a way that you can't force. And because of that, again, new administration, we're gonna run with that. We're not gonna fight it like the Daniel Bryan situation where they, it took just having to pull teeth to get them to put him over. And even then, as interviews have said, like, immediately after he wins, they're like, well, we want you to help get Roman Reigns over. He's going to be the next guy. And, he's like, well, I want to be the next guy. Like, even then, WWE was still fighting that. Now it feels like they're kind of running with it. And, the match was what it needed to be.
It's weird that certain people within the company didn't realize you can have more than one guy.
Yeah.
And right now they have so many guys. Like, yeah, Cody is probably the A champion, but it's arguable whether he's the top star.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's the case right now. Jay and Jimmy as well, they suffered a lot through that bloodline story.
They did.
You felt like for such a long time, man, what are they doing to these guys? Like, they need to give them something better. They need to put them in. They need to reward them for putting up with this endless story. And we're finally getting to see that with Jay. the character's not going to connect with everyone. No different than John Cena's character didn't connect with everyone. I think that's inevitable, but he does as many moves, if not more, than Cena. So yeah, you may have issues with his in-ring work, and maybe that's because the Usos for so many years were compared with all your favorite tag teams as being right on the same level. So maybe you have certain expectations for them that maybe you don't think they're meeting, but the guy gets the job done. I kind of thought that the tap out thing for Gunther was actually to make it a little more definitive of a victory, given how much he struggled against Gunther up until this point.
Yeah.
Like, they thought just a quick pin maybe wouldn't have felt as satisfying, or maybe wouldn't have caught the crowd as off guard, and they were looking for that. But yeah, it was a weird choice, but given Gunther's a guy that can beat people in so many different ways, maybe I'm not so opposed to the idea of him kind of getting caught like that.
The only problem I had with it, and I said it right after it happened, I generally am not a fan of submission finishes for baby faces because
people get into the 3 count, man.
You do, and that you have that pop that comes after 1, 2, 3 pop. A tap out is not the same. It's more of a gradual pop. Like, oh, did he tap out? Oh, okay, ring the bell. Then it's like it's more of it's not that moment. Like I just think you miss that when you don't have a pinfall win. And so I mean but again, that's kind of splitting hairs. Happy for Jey Uso. Really curious to see where they go from here. Does Gunther line up a rematch? Does Seth Rollins
Jay keep using Gunther's moves?
Yeah, it's a great question.
That was kind of a big subplot to the match, how he just kept using Gunther moves on him.
Yeah, for sure. Does Seth Rollins target Jey Uso now? Like, there's lots of questions, and overall, like I said, it did what it needed to do. Other matches on the card, we'll just run down them real quick. New Day beating the War Raiders by cheating to win their tag titles. Again, those guys. That was a great match, and it'll probably get lost in the weekend. But for a tag team match, it only got a little over 9 minutes. I thought he got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I love their gear being a tribute to Giant Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Las Vegas WrestleMania icon. The two teams in the match work great together, and I'm always glad when they do some sort of character switch, like with the New Day going heel, when it actually pays off and it doesn't just fall flat. Like, there's nothing stranger to me when someone undergoes this transformation and then doesn't do anything afterwards.
Yeah.
With the New Day, you definitely see it pay off, and I'm certainly happy about that.
Speaking of that, now we got Jade Cargill and Naomi. Naomi has the big heel turn and ends up losing to Jade Cargill. And again, only 9 minutes, but I thought it was really good for 9 minutes. And I'm actually happy for both of them. Jade Cargill, I thought, looked really good. They have... Obviously, they've worked with her in the ring, but they've also given her kind of a defined character where it's like these strength moves, these things. This is what we're going to build your matches around, these moments where you catch somebody out of the air. I think they've given her a focus, which is kind of the thing she didn't have in AEW, which kind of allows her to have that star power. And Naomi, I'm happy for her because she's finally got something she can get behind. I'm excited to see where her character goes because I think this is something she's been needing for a long time. And I just think Vince was always hesitant because she, the glow and all the stuff. And then, I think he was always hesitant to turn her heel, and she's killing it so far.
Yeah, it was one of those things where when they brought her back, I was happy for her. But in the back of my mind, I thought, why? What are they going to do with her? Like, you didn't really feel like her character, even when she won the women's title the one time years ago, it was just like, oh, that's cool. Who's next? Like, you didn't really... That character didn't really seem like there was anything I could sink my teeth into. Like, it didn't seem like it was very deep or it was very surface level. I like them building this heel character for her, this kind of almost homage to Owen Hart with the caution tape. I love that. I think this is something she can really work with and build a real character that's more than just, glowing in the dark and color changing boots. I'm excited about that. I think Jade is now at a point where she wrestles well enough to get over in WWE. I don't think she was ever going to be the type of worker that AEW would fully appreciate because they kind of have their expectations for what you should do in the ring. But she's tailor-made for WWE with her presentation, her look. I'm kind of excited for both of these women to see what's next in store for them.
And just like Tiffany Stratton at the post-match press conference, like, listening to Jade talk on the panel with those guys, she felt so natural up there. It wasn't like that stilted character. It was just very conversational. I still think sometimes they overdo the character talking, and I think more natural type stuff. I think Jacob Fatu should be a perfect example.
Yeah.
If you just let a dude sound like he sounds, or let a woman talk like she talks, I think that is more authentic and more connection with the audience.
I think you talk about wrestlers kind of being green in the ring, but I think sometimes it's more noticeable when they talk.
Yeah.
Where it's like clearly they're not fully buying into their own character, or it's so far of a deviation from their true persona they just can't sell it.
Yeah.
And I think the more you let them just speak their mind and be authentic, it's going to only help them get over and have people connect with them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that hopefully they'll continue to do as they move forward. Finally, you had not Chad Gable, El Grande Americano beating Rey Phoenix.
Maybe that guy is.
Yeah.
No idea.
Rey Phoenix, last-minute substitution for Rey Mysterio, who had a groin injury after SmackDown. At least that's what's being reported. Having to basically get your first WrestleMania match on less than 24 hours' notice. Rey Phoenix did an amazing job. Yeah. He stepped in and wrestled the match. It clearly was meant for Mysterio. They clearly tied in the whole metal plate and the face mask again, and that allowed Gable to get a cheap win. I know there are people upset that Phoenix took an early loss, but again, there's so many outs. Obviously, the cheating, the fact that he didn't have time to fully prepare for the match. He's wrestling against a guy who, we don't know if it's Chad Gable or not. There's lots of outs for Phoenix.
Fuego del Sol.
It's possible. Although, now that he's unmasked after, and we'll get to that maybe in a moment. But overall, I thought for a match that only went 8 minutes, I thought it got done what it needed to get done. Rey Phoenix had a great moment. He's going to have a lot of them in this company. And, the whole Chad Gable, El Grande Americano storyline kind of furthers on. And still would like Chad Gable to get a work rate match on WrestleMania someday where he really gets to go for 15 to 20 minutes. But overall, it was fine for what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, clearly they just ran with the match he was supposed to have with Mysterio, including winning. But, earlier in the night, they showed you the WrestleMania records for Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston, almost like a primer where it's like, you may not have a great record at WrestleMania and maybe certainly not early on, but that's kind of meaningless. What really matters, especially in a match like this, that's ultimately throwaway at the end of the day, just being on the card, especially only having joined the company about a month ago, that's pretty amazing. And I'm not going to worry too much about Rey Phoenix losing what was ultimately somebody else's match.
Yeah, for sure. And there are a lot of people not on the card, including Bayley now, which is kind of another irritation, I think.
Head scratcher there a little bit.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a moment when we get to night 2 of WrestleMania. Let's jump into the NXT event. Here are the results of the NXT event. I thought this was outstanding, as in the comments, like it stand and deliver, stand and delivered.
Always does.
It always does. And, I haven't had the chance to watch a ton of NXT TV leading up to this, so maybe I wasn't as excited as I normally would be for this. But this was an outstanding event. I don't think there was any match that was bad.
No.
You had, obviously, the just kind of running down the card real quick. Gigi Dolan, Tatum Paxley are going to have a chance to challenge for the women's tag titles coming up. Ricky Saints and Ethan Page had a really great match to open the card, with Saints defending his North American Championship. Hank and Tank finally dethroning Fraxium in what was a wild match that people really loved. Sol Ruca and just a crazy ladder match gets the big win to win the Women's North American Championship. You had the D'Angelo family split up with Stax turning his back on D'Angelo and Dark State getting the win. Vicaire winning the 4-way match with Julia Jada Parker and Jordan Grace to retain her women's title. And then Obafemi winning just a really, really good match. The comment about Javon Evans versus Vikingo, that sounds like a ridiculous match that would be a great main event for that Worlds Collide event. I'd be totally down for that.
Yeah, that was the name I immediately threw out yesterday talking about it, where you have Javon Evans, who, while being taller, isn't a huge dude. He's not going to make Vikingo look like a child. I think they could do some really cool work together.
But great event. And again, it was an early event. The call time for this was 5 a.m. for the folks in Las Vegas, but certainly didn't look like it. They put on an amazing show. Rather than go match by match, just kind of get your overall thoughts. What really stood out as you kind of look down this card?
I was really amazed at how much the crowd was behind Hank and Tank. And honestly, the match deserved it because to me, it stands up with any of the great NXT tag title matches we've seen on takeovers for, the past 9 years now, 9-10 years. Happy for Sol Ruca. I thought that ladder match was really good. I thought they might have Thea Hale win, given how much they hyped her return. Her move off the top of the ladder, being tipped over, landing on the calling was really cool. Dark State had to win their match, obviously, just to kind of solidify them as something I should care about. Stacks turning on Tony. That was great how they teased it the whole match as far as who's going to turn on who, because at one point it kind of seemed like Tony was just done with Stacks, and it was kind of a nice appetizer for what happened at WrestleMania Night 1 in the main event as far as someone turning on someone. I still think Vicaire is the most complete package as far as women's talent goes in that match yesterday. I think they all obviously have bright futures, but she's kind of undeniable, and then you see this deal with AAA, and it just makes even more sense. Man, it's funny. I don't normally like super dominant champions, but man, I'm gonna be sad the day Obafemi loses the title. I think because that dude is just a beast.
Yes,
and probably right now my favorite big man wrestler. The dude is just entertaining as crap. That match was probably the best main event I've seen Trick Williams in.
Yeah.
In an NXT event. Some of his matches, one-on-one matches specifically, kind of come off a little wonky at times, but I don't know if it was the inclusion of Javon, but that match was flawless, and I'm excited to see what's next for Obafemi. I mean, is that where we implant Jeff Cobb? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. Again, with the potential crossovers with AAA, there's also a possibility you could find a challenger from there come in for there's a lot of different possibilities. But clearly with Femi, they think he needs to still be in developmental, which is completely fair.
There's no hurry.
There's no hurry to bring him up. He's really good though, and like I said, overall it was a great event, and there are so many years where it would have overshadowed WrestleMania because it would have been so good, and thankfully WrestleMania was good enough that didn't happen. But great stuff from NXT. They're rolling along. They're going to be live Tuesday night from Las Vegas, so I would expect surprises there because you still got a lot of people in town. So, and we will certainly have a women's tag team title match, which who knows
how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, who knows how that's going to turn out. It's clearly going to feature either probably Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria now, or you can bring Liv Morgan in, who's super popular, along with Raquel Rodriguez. Yeah. So I don't think you can go wrong either way there. But NXT rolling along, doing great stuff.
I don't know what they plan on doing with Lynch, presuming that she is the new partner for Lyra Valkyria tonight. But I almost feel like you have the opportunity now to let her and Seth be a group together under Heyman and it not bury Seth like when they tried it a few years ago. Yeah. They made him look like a complete doofus. And I think maybe you could do it right this time around.
Oh, 100%. I think that's where we're headed, probably. We'll see how they get there, but I'm curious to see how they kind of work that out.
People pointed out how they were sitting next to Heyman at the Hall of Fame ceremony, which you didn't really think much of it because you always think of the Hall of Fame as being kind of outside of the scope of storyline progression.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's some interesting storylines that are going to come out. I think the Raw after WrestleMania, the NXT after WrestleMania, even the SmackDown after WrestleMania, where we're expecting to see Aleister Black come back. I think there's a lot of really newsworthy stuff that's going to happen this week. Maybe today. Who knows? On the Countdown show. Really quickly, before we get to night 2 and our preview of that, you have watched a ton of wrestling this week. I've watched a little bit of the non-WWE stuff. What has stood out from kind of the non-WWE stuff this week as far as the indie, the collective, Joey Janela stuff, what has jumped out at you?
I think the biggest one obviously is Bloodsport.
Yeah.
I think it's the one that feels like a huge event. I don't think it's something, and we've seen WWE try it with like the Raw and NXT Underground. I don't think it's something you could ever do as a weekly show, but I think as a one-off every quarter doing some sort of event that features what feels like more shoot fighting and less wrestling, I think it would always go over really well. You get to see some really wild matchups. Getting to see Zack Sabre Jr. and Jonathan Gresham was really cool.
Yeah.
I would love to see Gresham show up somewhere in NXT or somewhere I'm going to watch him. Anytime I get to see Minoru Suzuki is always a delight, and on some of the collective shows he's been there. Hasn't really had the best luck with his matchups. I think his like I mentioned at the start, his match with Yoshihiko was probably the best so far, and that's probably just because he was in control of the entire match and he wasn't wrestling. There's so many pro wrestlers in the world.
There are.
I just don't know if they've all warranted any amount of ring time with Minoru Suzuki, but I'm still digesting more of this stuff as we go. It's such a great weekend, and I don't think WWE's increased involvement with GCW and the whole ID program has done anything to tarnish that. If anything, it's given me more of an incentive to watch matches that maybe I wouldn't have had on my radar.
Yeah, and I think, it certainly hasn't really toned down GCW's product, as we saw from Sabu and Joey Janela.
Yeah. Atticus Cogar.
Who it was in the ID tournament. Like, he's a guy that, sticking skewers in people's heads on Friday and wrestling under a WWE umbrella on Wednesday. Like, you're seeing just this incredible crossover on the indie level that is unprecedented. And his match with Fuego del Sol was pretty good, for that type of match, which I'm not crazy about.
Not my style, but they definitely executed.
Yeah, for sure. And what happens with Fuego del Sol? He unmasked. He took his boots off. Is he retiring? That, to me, he's a guy that I think is really tight with Cody. So would it shock me to see him show up as a trainer or something in WWE? Like, that wouldn't shock me at all. But there's a lot of really good stuff. Always support your indies. We talk about on the music podcast, like, go support your bands, go see them in concert. Same thing with independent wrestling. I think more than ever, especially as maybe the world of the major companies shrink more when you have these acquisitions. I think in supporting your local wrestling, it becomes more important than ever. And I think, get out there and see it, because there's a lot of really crazy stuff. Are there too many wrestlers? Probably. But you got to love that people love this business to the point where they're willing to go out there and do these crazy things for your entertainment. So kudos to GCW, to DDT, Tokyo Joshi Pro. They just a lot of really good stuff, and other companies as well over the WrestleMania weekend. We're going to wrap this up today. Well, not wrap it up. We got to still do our Empire Express at the end, but we're going to wrap up kind of the wrestling portion of this with our Night 2 preview. And again, we're not going to get too deep into this. We'll put the card up on the screen. Obviously, the two big question marks coming into Night 2 are, who's Lyra Valkyria's tag team partner? We assume it to be Becky Lynch. I'm not happy really at all that they've taken Bayley off this card. I just, for someone who's such an MVP of this company, wrestles on every show, wrestles every night, does all the media, all the stuff like that, I kind of hate that for her. I also feel like she's really been getting over as a babyface with the crowd, and maybe this is an effort to get her more over, potentially build a feud between her and Lynch.
Maybe.
And kind of get Bayley back to that level where she's just a really red-hot babyface. And maybe it'll work out in the end, but, I just don't like the fact she's not on the card. I think you could have had Lynch attack her in the match and done the same thing. And obviously the TVA next to Randy Orton, I think a lot of people assume it might be someone like Rusev who fills in there. And again, whoever it is, it wasn't supposed to be that match. It's going to be the same situation as Rey Fenix. It was supposed to be Kevin Owens. Certainly wish him a healthy and speedy recovery. He's so valuable to this company. It's a shame he's going to miss out on this. And who knows how long he'll be out. The rest of the card, there's some wild cards on this card and some matches that really could steal the show on Night 2. And then obviously the main event with Cena and Rhodes closing out WrestleMania weekend. What are you looking forward to on this? Because like I said, there's a lot to like about this Night 2 card.
Yeah, I think first off, you look at the women's title match. I think the way that they've told this story, you have to have Io Sky retain.
Yeah,
there's no good reason for her to not win, given how dismissive the other two have been toward her, which at times felt kind of out of character for both of them. They're not the type to just openly disrespect somebody for no reason. But, I don't really want to see Belair or Ripley win that match. The four-way for the Intercontinental title, that'll be interesting, especially now with the AAA news. Does that make you think that you're more likely to see Penta or Dominic win it to kind of give them something else to tour around Mexico with and do shows with some of the AAA talent? It's hard to say. I could see this going any one of four ways. Balor probably seems the least likely to win, but it does give you the opportunity to get the title off Breaker without him factoring into the decision.
Yeah.
I think Styles and Paul is going to be awesome. I think it may not matter a whole lot as far as the match itself, but it's going to be ridiculous, and I think you're just going to be reminded of how great AJ Styles is.
Yeah.
The Bailey thing's weird because my initial thought as this happened is I don't really like the idea of Bailey just being plugged into a tag team. I didn't like that from the beginning, but then when you do it and I make peace with it, then to pull her out, it's like, wait, what are we doing? What's going on here? I think Bailey is kind of in a Seth Rollins kind of position where for so long they've not given her anything for me to be excited about. I have nothing against her. I like Bailey, but there's just something missing right now, and I hope they find some way to make her babyface run feel better to me, because I feel like her presentation, her music, so much of it just feels uninspired.
Yeah.
And I hate that I feel that way, but they need to shake it up somehow, and I don't know how, but hopefully they figure that out. But again, I feel the same way about Becky Lynch. Throwing her in a tag team seems kind of weird too, if that's the route they go. So we'll see what happens. I want to withhold judgment until I see where this unfolds. The Orton versus question marks. Now that it's not Owens, obviously, whatever happens. I'm not really invested in this.
Yeah.
I'm more depressed that we're having a WrestleMania without either Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn.
Yeah.
Having both missing from WrestleMania is just really, really kind of a bummer. Otherwise, Rhodes and Cena, it's the main event of night too. Rhodes wins, right? You don't end it with Cena winning. You never know, but and you don't know how the crowd's going to react.
Yeah.
Because the most recent SmackDown, it really felt like they were very close to jumping on the Cena side of things. And if it wasn't for the great promo work of both guys that kind of got it back on track, I'm anxious to see how the crowd reacts to the match itself.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how overbooked it is, because I think if The Rock's in town, we're going to get Rock involvement. Who knows where else we're going to go with that. It does feel like Rhodes needs to win it. I know that Cena and the whole breaking the record and all that other stuff, but like I said last night, with Charlotte being so close to that record now, you almost feel like it makes more sense to have her do it first.
Yeah.
And Cena's
Which is such a weird thing because they're two different titles.
They are, but it's still a number.
They can't compete with each other for them.
But, when you start getting into that, then it's like, well, should we even be totaling them all up to begin with? Because we have NWA titles, we have WCW titles.
What counts as a world title, what doesn't?
Right. So it's like, that there's, you can really start getting into the whether these should be,
because there's some dude on the Indies who's won 87 world titles
for sure, and even Flair himself disputes the number that WWE says is his number. So it's when they go back and look at Cody Rhodes or CM Punk or anybody who's been in AEW, they're not going to count AEW accomplishments in their world title. So again,
not until they buy them.
Until they buy them somewhere down the road. But again, that it is what it is. But whatever that fictional number is, if Charlotte gets by it first, to me that makes a lot of sense. And then they go from there.
That's going to be a tough one to pull off without having the fans just revolt against it. I think they're in a weird position with Charlotte right now.
She's another one who could benefit from having Heyman.
Yeah,
as just this mastermind and have her go on just a
she's Roman Reigns right now.
Yeah.
Like, people just don't want to root for her at all.
So basically don't even try. Like have her be the most evil, manipulative.
Nothing's more easily to get over than someone that detestable.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you do it long enough, she'll become cool, and that's just like what happened with Reigns. You know, eventually the fans turn back because they like hating her, and you know, same way I think that's the path they should go on with her.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But the match you jumped over, the Damian Priest Drew McIntyre match, and
that's on my list for some reason,
and kind of fitting in a way because it does feel like the other match on this card, but it also feels like the match that could steal the show because those guys are both really good, and I feel like neither one of them really wanted to be in this spot on WrestleMania where you're wrestling the special singles match, as New Japan would call it. You're just...
Is one of them going to get a title shot after this?
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
And, there's rumors that Slayer is going to be there to play Damian Priest to the ring. Obviously, we saw Rick Rubin yesterday, which, again...
Longtime producer of Slayer.
So you just kind of think, well, maybe that's going to happen. That could end up being the match of the night, and nobody's really talking about it. And those guys have been really, really good. So I'm looking forward to that. And again...
Can we get Living Color playing with Slayer?
Maybe. That's possible. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great card. I think from a match standpoint, like in ring, this has the potential to be a better night than night one, as good as night one was, and as sports entertainment as night one was. This kind of feels like the pro wrestling night potentially, with your women's title. I mean, those three women are your equivalent of the three men you had in the main event of night one. As far as your big characters, your pro wrestlers. That four-way match for the Intercontinental title, those guys are all great. Styles, Paul, great in ring. The women's tag title match, I think, will be better than people think. Whatever they do with Orton, again, I feel like it's weird if you bring somebody back who hasn't been with the company and then immediately have them lose. But like we just saw Rey Fenix lose in like 8 minutes, so it's not a big deal.
No.
And then Cena Rhodes is going to be sports entertainment to the max, I'm sure, and it'll be fine. But there's a lot of really good stuff on that night 2 card, and we'll be here to talk about it tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure you join us. We'll try to keep it to about a 30-minute podcast tomorrow since it's a work day. But we've kind of gotten everything else out of the way, unless some other big news breaks, and then maybe
buy somebody else,
and then maybe we'll be on early tomorrow to talk about it. So make sure you keep in tune with social media. And again, no music podcast tonight. We'll be pushing that back to next Saturday. So we have kind of really be able to give it the time we need. So we'll have 2 music podcasts, our Hard Rock Empire next week. So
it's a good plan for WrestleMania week, I think, just in general, is kind of mix up the schedule a bit.
Well, and we may be doing it again in a couple of weeks because we have Sonic Temple coming up, and
that's also true.
Early in May. So don't be surprised if we don't have another double music podcast weekend coming up here soon. So check local listings, as we say.
Absolutely.
In the business. It is time to get to the Empire Express. Are you ready to roll?
I think so.
There's a lot of things that are, some of it's wrestling related, but this is also the way to kind of throw some other stuff in there, since it's going to be very wrestling heavy podcast over these 2 days. Good news from Nintendo. The delayed Switch 2 pre-sale has been set for April the 24th, with the base unit of the new console remaining unchanged in price. Some peripherals will be slightly more expensive than announced. Are you ready to get your pre-order in?
Absolutely. I'm kind of surprised that the base unit didn't change in price. I'm guessing the backlash that could have received would have been pretty brutal. I don't mind paying a little more for peripherals out of the gate, just the same as I don't mind paying a little more for games coming out of the box. I'd rather do that than feel like I'm going to get nickel and dimed with microtransactions on the back end. So, it's 2025. Things are expensive. I'm all for it. Crunchyroll has done a 180 as their CEO announced this week that they will not use artificial intelligence for the creative process of their anime, as it will only be used for back-end systems instead. Are you surprised by that news?
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised by that news and skeptical. Because
do you believe that news?
Yeah, that's really the better question. Is I don't know if I believe that news. My fear is that it's going to be one of those things that they're going to use it and just not tell you about it, and then, oh, whoops, we accidentally used that for this thing.
We have an anime being made with AI. It just seems weird to think that they're going to go this direction instead.
So we'll see. From a PR standpoint, it's saying the right things. We'll see if they actually follow through with it. In music news tied to pro wrestling, Fozzy, the band fronted by Chris Jericho, has released a new single as they continue their 25th anniversary tour. What does the future hold for Jericho?
I mean, eventually it's going to lead him back to WWE, a retirement run, Hall of Fame induction, everything the dude deserves, because no matter how you feel about his current in-ring work and creative, the guy's a legend. The guy, if you put him on your Mount Rushmore, I can't argue with you. And he deserves that kind of proper farewell. I think in comments he's made lately, he's definitely made it sound like that's way more likely than maybe how he made it sound 2 years ago. So it'll happen. We'll see when. I mean, as long as he can get big paydays from Tony, can't blame him for cashing those checks either. At a New Japan event Saturday, Jeff Cobb wrestled his final event for the company for now, losing to Hiroshi Tanahashi. The current tour also marks the end of the New Japan Pro Wrestling careers for Tetsuya Naito and Bushi. Surprised by all these departures, and how soon until Cobb shows up stateside?
I wouldn't be shocked to see Cobb on NXT Tuesday night. I think clearly the fact that they rushed his departure because he was supposed to go through the beginning of May, and I think he was going to wrestle on Dontaku before he was kind of off. The fact that they moved it up clearly means they have plans for him very soon. Maybe he's the next challenger for Obafemi, and I'd be totally cool with that. Naito and Bushi are kind of weird because it feels like Bushi was going to stay, but when Naito announced he was leaving, Bushi announced he was leaving right after. I don't know where those two are going to go. Naito's kind of washed. Honestly, WWE could be up in play because you could have him come in and wrestle a WWE style, which would be far less physical. To me, it feels like they probably end up in CMLL or NOAH or something like that. But just kind of strange. Finally, one video game pro wrestling crossover as Fortnite has added Cody Rhodes and The Undertaker to the still popular game. Does this surprise you?
Absolutely not. We've in our game coverage, we've done several stories talking about how popular older games still are with a large set of gamers. I think a lot of the newer games just have had trouble convincing people to abandon games like Fortnite. I mean, we just saw the Minecraft movie do pretty well in the box office. That's still a huge draw for people. It's Fortnite, the amount of money that game has made over the years and still makes, and they still get these huge collaborations. I'm kind of surprised all this hasn't happened sooner.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen ads for it all weekend, and it's kind of wild for sure. But continues to be super popular, so can't blame those guys for continuing to make money, and the crossover again with two characters like Cody Rhodes and The Undertaker makes a ton of sense. But that is going to wrap things up for a special long edition of the Nerdcast News Report on this Sunday. Again, no music podcast tonight. We're going to take the week off because of WrestleMania. We'll be back with you with two music podcasts next weekend, Saturday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time or thereabouts. We'll let you know if that time schedule changes. But it'll be the music of April the 4th, and then we'll come back on Sunday night with the music of April the 11th. Really good stuff. We'll have all that next weekend. Again, tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. That's tentatively the plan. We'll kind of go and play it by ear, but we'll have night 2 coverage of WrestleMania on the Nerdcast News Report, so hopefully you'll join us tomorrow morning for that. Big thanks to everyone joining us this morning. Big thanks to Mike as well. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you are checking out the Nerdcast Empire. We'll be back with you again tomorrow morning as we recap Night 2 of WrestleMania here on the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.